The thing that's incredible is that I couldn't think of anything that would piss a project manager off more than that. I mean, they would. I've seen it, and these engineers, like, they don't want to piss off the PM. They want them to be happy. A PM would rather get bad news like 10% of the way into the work. They would be
100%.
happy. They would be like,
Yeah, yeah.
"That's awesome. I'm so glad. Like, we can do something about it.
Yeah.
We can spend some money, like, we can forecast it." There's nothing they hate more than, that 80% of the way through, and then suddenly someone nervously comes up at the
Yeah,
whiteboard
it's that
and
it's
goes,
they
"Actually,
just come out of the like executive head office meeting where they've just said, yeah, our dates are very believable. We're definitely going to hit them. And then they walk into like the look ahead meeting and the engineer goes, that task that was on track 3 days ago, we're going to push it out by 2 weeks. And then the worst thing is because they know they're delivering terrible news, the incentive is to underestimate the blowout again.
Yeah, and
so,
then do it again."
So you'll do it again in 2 weeks time. 100%. G'day everyone, welcome back to the Offsite podcast. I'm Jason Lancini, and today we are joined by Sam Hanisch, filling in for Carlos, who is on a double wedding week away in South Africa. But luckily, we've got awesome co-hosts and some decent topics to dive into. Samuel, how are you, sir?
Yeah, I'm good. Thanks for having me back. Is he doing 2 weddings? He managed to
He's
put
doing
2
one.
weddings together.
No. He hasn't pulled off one of the best planned trips to South Africa ever. No, it's a traditional wedding. So I think it's like one
Right.
consecutive weekends is the setup. I was telling someone the other day that like one wedding almost sent me broke. So I don't know how they do two.
Sounds like it's going to send all the guests broke as well. 2 weeks away.
Yeah. It's a good setup for local tourism because anyone flying there has now got a week and a half of accommodation. That should be we're just about to dive into UK budget and revenue raising measures. That should have been what they announced. All weddings in the UK are now over 2 weekends.
Yeah, I don't know what hit them worse, the budget or the wedding away in South Africa. So.
Yeah. Very good. So we've got 3 things on the docket today. So first of all, we're going to tackle probably what is the hottest issue in the UK right now, which is the budget announcement from yesterday as we're recording this, actually, where there are epic amounts of saving/austerity measures, including about 1.3 billion worth of infrastructure projects chopped off the bat. So we're going to dive into that and see what's affected and what's going to happen from here. Then we are going to shift gears and talk about, I would say, a somewhat overlooked area of project management, certainly on some types of projects, which is production rates and tracking production rates. These are the things that drive how we build estimates and schedules and costs, and they often can fall out of focus as the project progresses along. Finally, we're going to dive into I want to say controversial, but possibly a good news story that just might have like a bit of an odd angle, which is a recent announcement of a UK engineering design firm winning a design competition for the master planned reconstruction of Kharkiv in Ukraine. So it's a fairly ambitious plan run by a very, very well-known architects foundation, but it seems somewhat odd to be planning the reconstruction of the country while it's still in the midst of a war. Lot to dig into, and Sam, happy that you've joined for the convo, mate. Should we dive straight in with this budget?
Yeah, let's go.
Bit of background. The UK government announced its 2024 autumn budget, where the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, announced the cancellation of about 1.3 billion worth of infrastructure projects. This was part of a broader strategy to address what was claimed to be about a £40 billion gap in the country's accounts. And what they're claiming is a £22 billion shortfall from the previous government. There are a bunch of things planned, which include tax increases, which is not great for UK employers, a bunch of spending reductions where they've magically found almost £8 billion in savings across different portfolios. And interestingly, the reduction of using external consultancy, which seems like there's always money to be found there. The same thing happened in Australia a number of years ago.
Is that in the 8 billion? The 8 billion is consultancies plus across like government services?
The 8 billion is what they've labeled spending reductions across a whole bunch of portfolios or ministries. And that includes the reduction in reliance on external consultancy spending.
I'd say that's no one's going to be upset with that.
No, but it does feel like that's the first thing that like goes, and it just seems weird that like, why is that? If it's so easy to go and cut that, why is it there? They're also going to borrow some more money, which, judging how interest rates are, that's going to result in some more pain down the road. So diving into the projects that are cancelled as of the announcement, and this comes off the back of previously a bunch of big projects being cancelled or kicked down the road, including I think nearly £2 billion Stonehenge tunnel. So the first is a project called the Port of Liverpool Access, which was estimated value about £335 million. Then there is the A358 Taunton to Southfields, which was up to about £500 million project that I think was sat with or possibly awarded to Vinci already.
Yeah.
The M27 Junction 8 project, which was a smaller project, about 50 million. Then another roundabout at Great Yarmouth, which is another 50 million pounds. And then this one's going to hurt a little bit, which is the A1 Duelling to Northumberland. So it's the Morpeth to Ellingham section at about 400 million pounds. That one had approval to go forward, and I think Costain either had it or were in early works or something on that as well. So today in the UK, there's some contractors that have got teams working on projects that don't exist anymore.
You would imagine there would be hundreds of people that are earmarked to these jobs that are, waking up to that news. I often wonder how early that they find out. Like, do you think Vinci are sort of given the nudge 3 months in advance of this? Like, you think or hope surely that there's some preparation or planning there. Go, hey, by the way, this might be coming up. But I really don't know.
Have you ever been on a project that's had the funding changed on it at this similar stage?
No, not. I've been on plenty where it's like, yeah, you're going to get it, but I've never been on one and it's waiting sort of minister approval, but never been on one that's like, yeah, it's a go and then gets pulled in a budget. Have you?
No, I've never, but and over recent times, I'm thinking about a number of interactions with projects that were in similar spots that we'd worked with. And I know that there was a section of down in Melbourne, the Melbourne Airport Rail section where that was basically awarded, or the work that maybe it was like a limited to notice to proceed or something. There was a whole team basically mobilized on the thing.
Yeah.
And then I guess similar to what's happened in the UK, so they definitely weren't told in advance. There was no prior, because those things would get out immediately. So the second,
true.
The second the government tries to do the right thing, or do not the right thing, do them a favor, it's going to get out. So you probably just have to tell everyone. But they basically find out with everyone else. Although what typically happens is you get the idea that it's under review. I don't know if you recall in Oz, maybe almost a year ago now, there was that review over about 8 billion in spending across Australian projects.
Yeah, the feds were sitting on reviewing it. There were a bunch of jobs held up by pretty much anything that had federal dollars attached was on hold until they finished that, which I mean is probably a good thing. I think, it makes me think about like, I don't know if it was last year, but with the Melbourne budget, everyone in the industry assumed that suburban rail loop was going to get the bullet, like people working there. So I think it would have been a similar atmosphere over there, because I think everybody was assuming it was going to be a bad budget and there was probably going to be some projects hit. So there was probably a bunch of jobs out there thinking, people in the industry looking at what's out there coming up, thinking some of these are going to get the bullet. But those two jobs there, that's going to cost them. It's not like it's a zero cost. Like there's going to be some cost there to those companies.
What's interesting is that the everyone assumed that the one of the mega projects in Oz would get cancelled or descoped or value engineered, and they just ended up cancelling a whole bunch of road projects around the place and putting even more money into the
Yeah,
big
yeah.
mega project.
I
And I was
think a lot
thinking
of
about
people are
whether
still
it's
surprised.
yeah, exactly. Well, it's the classic we want to put the money into the regions until we're actually short on money, and then we'll just keep putting money where all the voters are.
Yeah,
I wonder whether the same thing. I was thinking about whether the same thing's happening here, because a lot of these projects are in the regions or as part of highways connecting cities.
yeah,
And there's a separate conversation happening in the UK about maybe reinstigating the northern section of HS2 and some money for HS2. So I wonder if this is just the kind of freeing up some budget to put even more money into the big project.
I mean, at this point, like when you're delivering a budget that is that tough, you imagine there's a lot of politics going into where this money's going, if any they got sitting around, because it's all it's all good when there's heaps of cash and you can just throw it at large infrastructure projects and everyone's happy, everyone's working. So yeah, I imagine there's a lot of politics going on at the moment.
On a non-construction note, they've done the very sneaky way to do revenue raising, which is not to increase income tax, not to increase corporation tax, but to increase the national insurance contribution. So in the UK, for those that are not from the UK, there's this national insurance contribution which gets paid by both employer and employee as a percentage of overall salary. They've increased that from about 13.8 to 15.8%, which is effectively like a payroll tax on employers.
Yeah, right. 2%.
There was, I think I read, analysts estimated that a 1 percentage point increase could yield about 8.5 billion a year. So 2% should be roughly double that. But that is definitely making employing people in the UK more expensive yet again.
Stifling growth, and how hard trying to start a business and create jobs, and you've got this on top. Pretty tough.
Yeah, especially with not to get like too political, especially with the all signs pointing to potentially a Trump election in the US, and the plan there for him to continue to reduce the corporation tax rate. Like, it is heading in the opposite direction.
Yeah.
Anyway, that is definitely all the news. I know you talked to some of our team in the UK this morning just before we started recording this, and literally it's what everyone's talking about.
Yeah, we're saying like you kind of feel for is it the Chancellor whose face is attached to the I guess every news article.
Yeah,
that's a tough gig. That's a big bullet to take. It's gonna be just gonna be the not very popular person for a while, but I imagine a lot of people are really hurting about it. But
do you reckon if you went into politics, you'd be thinking preemptively about like what the cartoon of you would look like?
I think you think about a lot of things that's pretty low on the list. You've obviously thought about it, have you?
No.
Is that what's stopping you? You're like, I don't know if I'm gonna like the cartoon.
Yeah, no. Let me pencil in that tomorrow. I'll give it some thought, and then I'll come back to you on what I think it would be. It wouldn't be good.
In the scheme of things, though, £1.5 billion of work doesn't seem like a lot off the UK. It feels like with all the things that are going on, they could, if they really needed to trim some stuff up, they could probably trim it up. But the numbers are up around like 100 billion worth of sort of 130 billion worth of active work in construction.
Yeah, I think it comes down to obviously if you can trim cost out of like ongoing kind of OPEX costs, like whatever you're paying to consultants or whatever, you're making that saving theoretically every year, and that's got a way bigger impact than the $1.3 billion in commitments for specific projects in a one-off way.
Yeah.
But then again, the 1.3 billion's adding potentially, or I think they're raising, or they're at least raising this like debt ceiling equivalent thing of about 50 billion. So that 1.3 billion's theoretically going straight onto national debt, which is going to be, that's hundreds of millions a year in interest. Those things add up. You got to cut some things.
Yeah.
So anyway, That is a hot topic in the UK today. That's the take of two Aussies on it.
You know nothing about economics.
Let's jump forward. Okay, next topic. This is something we do know about, or at least you do, or I'm going to pretend to. Core of project management is production rates. They're something that is the starting point for any contractor tendering a job and thinking about the idea of how much is it going to cost to build this bridge or this tunnel or this road. You have to start by working out the work that needs to be done and then thinking about how long it's going to take and what resources it's going to take. And at the core of that is some assumption of X number of widgets, X number of panels per hour or per day. But in my experience, and I guess in projects that we've seen around the world, that connection to the idea of that production rate being a core determinant of whether you're making or losing money as a contractor starts to become less tracked the closer to construction project delivery you get, especially on jobs that are not very clearly production type jobs. I would say there are certain jobs which are very much production type jobs and they're managing production rates every day, constantly. Let's start with like your thoughts on production rates in general and why and how they might get like lost in the day-to-day of especially big projects that are doing different things every day.
Yeah, I mean, when you start to think about the delivery of work and, you know, what's a consistent thing you see across all jobs when you're looking at what you're trying to achieve, you've sort of priced a piece of work, and then when you're delivering it, you're trying to really, like, you know, ideal scenario, you deliver on the budget, you make a bit extra on top of that, and everything that sort of defines that, you know, what we price and how we're going to get there generally is like there's half of it at least is some form of production rate.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you're in there and delivering the work, often these tasks are, you know, months on end, or, you know, there's a duration of time. They're often not made up of day by day activities. And so when it comes down to it, every day, especially as a project manager or a construction manager, or an engineer that owns a cost code, your fear factor is you're getting to the end of the month and you have no idea where you're at. You might be delivering a piece of work that's going to take 4 months. And so you're trying to work out day to day, how are we tracking? Like, are we doing well? Are we not? And so when you break it down to the smallest piece, you're really trying to get a picture of, well, are we on target today or aren't we? And so the production tracking is super powerful. You're really like distilling down these huge costs that build up these projects into like a daily element or some sort of metric that you can then get someone to track, and it's going to give you at least a better, you know, an indication of where you're at. Otherwise, you sort of, you know, when you look at an activity, you go, if you don't have a production rate, how do you work out where you're at? You're going, well, I think it's going to take this many days longer, but, you know, your manager's asking you, how did you work that out? Like, is that just on your feel, or, you know, where have you got that information? So yeah, it's super powerful. If outside, I can't think of really, you know, you could look at civil construction, 80% of what you do, you could probably come up with some sort of production metric that you could track that's going to give you a better indication than just forward planning the amount of time left to complete a task. So super powerful.
But you find like there's a, you know, if we're doing a pipeline or we're doing some kind of fairly conventional civil or earthworks type of project or a multi-span bridge, projects will tend towards doing production rate tracking pretty intuitively. And then for some reason you get to like a kind of multidisciplinary project, especially a very big project, and it's like it's not even thought about sometimes, and people are going back to kind of, okay, the plan is you and me, engineer, supervisor, and we just kind of think, right, how long is this going to take? Do you agree with how long this is going to take? And that's kind of our plan.
Yeah.
And I think there's a logical justification for that, which is, on very large projects, the overhead of the project is very large. And so the cost of time is very large. And so when you're balancing cost to lay X number of widgets or whatever it is, the getting it done on time is much more valuable than like the cost to do it. But I don't think that's the reason why it doesn't happen. I think that the reason it doesn't happen is because the work that we're doing today and this week looks different to what we're doing next week, and what looks different to what we're doing the week after.
Yeah.
I think people are often not like stepping back and thinking about what's like the common element of production through the work.
Yeah, definitely. I think people, like when you say production rate, you sort of lock to, it feels natural when you're doing, pipe laying for 4 months and you go, well, we'll do production rate planning, or, you're laying out material for 4 or 5 weeks. But I think that it comes down to, we associate naturally, when we want to understand cost, we want to look at production tracking, and it's usually tied to something that we self-perform. And I think a lot of the reason you don't see it in these large infrastructure projects is because, more and more as we go through time now, it's less that you see these big companies self-performing work. From a risk profile, it just doesn't make sense. They're not geared up to sort of have the plant and equipment to, build as efficiently, unless that's their core business. There's now a lot of, small, I'm thinking of like earth moving, drainage, those sorts of things. You just see less now that companies self-perform that work. And so I think the natural tendency is, when it's not self-performed, that you just don't, you're like, oh, it's not my risk anymore. I've sort of transferred that over to someone else. When in reality, that you still own the time risk on it. So you've handed over the cost, but the time's still your problem. And so you often see this thing where, the engineer who's been used to just delivering package, like subcontracting work out, and they're really great at managing a contract, when you have huge overruns on these projects, and when it comes down to it, it's, the subbie's late, maybe you've stitched them up, they're not getting the variations, they've lost a lot of money, but at the end of the day, it's your project, you're late. And those sort of fundamentals around production, early on, if you can apply it, even if it's a subbie package, you can apply production planning, and it's probably going to tell you more than anything else that, hey, we're looking like we're going to be late. We need to do something about it. Even if it's, not my risk from a cost perspective, we're still going to be late.
One of the interesting things, and this is a little bit of a tangent, that just riffing off what you were saying, there is, when you've got one primary or two primary activities that are happening on a project at a time, it's kind of easy conceptually to go, right, this area is like driving piles, this area is putting in bridge decks or whatever, and we're going to measure that production rate.
Yeah.
When you have kind of these multidisciplinary big projects, there can be so many competing things that need to happen, that almost the way that the job is conceptualized leads to this problem. I guess what I mean is, if you're trying to do the job as efficiently as possible, you're probably prioritizing like the flow of those activities.
Yeah.
So that you've got piling production maximized, you've got deck installation maximized, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And when you build a schedule for a project that has all of these competing interests to hit a deadline, you start delivering a project not as efficiently as possible. You're delivering it like as theoretically quick as possible. And I guess that touches on this, like the big meta argument about CPM versus other methods of scheduling.
Yeah.
But it becomes hard when your schedule, or the way that you need to deliver the project, isn't optimized for driving production, because you naturally can have these spots where a contractor or your self-delivery team hit like, okay, we can't, for this period, we can't continue the production because some other activity needs to happen, or there's like competing interests in an area.
Yeah. I mean, at a certain point, you have to sacrifice. Like, you can't just do one thing continuously to maximize the efficiency on that, because, pretty much unless it's a pipe laying job, a big long pipeline, go for your life. But most of these jobs now where, 5 competing elements, it's musical chairs. Like your quickest way to the end is finding some sort of happy medium where they all get their scope done in the quickest way possible. I think though, there's still like, even in those scenarios, there's something to be said for having an understanding of your production, even if it's not. And I think often that's a lot of what a lot of project managers want to see is that they're, engineers that own scope understand their rates at least. Like they have an understanding that this is how I'm performing, even if it's just a small piece of work, because I think it really shows, if you know that, then you really have a good grasp of like where you're going to be, what's happening as part of your work. So I think there's something to be said having to be an engineer, to have that in your toolkit and to be thinking about those sorts of things, even if it doesn't make sense for like one element.
Yeah, 100%. Like even if when the job was tendered, they had no way because of the competing nature of how production was going to happen. Even if what your production that you're planning doesn't really reflect what the job was tendered at, it's definitely in the micro very beneficial to have I think it's going to take that long because it's 400 widgets and we're going to do 40 per day or whatever.
Yeah.
So maybe thinking about it from like an engineer's or construction manager's toolkit, there's almost like 2 elements to the production rate. There is what we plan to do from a production perspective, which then validates the duration that we think it's going to take. And then there's the other side of like what we actually did, so we can start to measure against that. If you're thinking about, let's imagine we're on one of these really complex projects. There is lots of competing types of production happening. I don't know, let's pick a complex one. We're doing a like launch box for a TBM. How would you think about setting up or thinking about how you can use production rates to, better understand the performance of the scope of work?
Yeah, I guess like you're sort of looking at your program for that portion of work. You're trying to find things that are repeatable, like they're pieces of work that are going to take a while. So there's probably a lot of excavation there. So you would want to understand some sort of metric about how much dirt you're pulling out and whether it's getting treated, carted off site, that sort of thing. You'd be looking at your critical path to deliver that work, and you'd be looking at the things that are close to that critical path to go, all right, what are the key things that if we don't hit them, what's going to drive our date out? Definitely things that you can measure and get sort of an update. I think that what I've seen on a lot of projects is that everyone knows that it's sort of this, you're never going to be able to chase down this dream of having all these metrics just sitting there getting constantly updated day to day, like it's expecting.
That's what I was just,
that's robots. What they usually do. What's that?
No, I was just going to say that was the other thing that I was just noting as you were talking was like what you're describing is also that like production rates can be ephemeral. They can like come and they can be relevant for a certain part of the job, but sometimes it's impossible to have, right, for the entire length of this project, we're going to track rebar installed or something. And that's like that's our key production rate. They can come and go.
Yeah. And like what I've seen that works very successfully is having understanding your program. You sort of task groups of your team to report on key things. So, the earthworks team's reporting on, how much dirt they've moved out as sort of production, and are they on track or are they behind? And I think having that, giving something to each team, some teams are carrying more because it's close to the critical path or it's more measurable, but it sort of instills this expectation that you have a full understanding of what you're doing each day and how you're getting there. And even if you don't have the full picture, you can just imagine compared to a job where you're sort of just looking at, all right, how much duration to go? Like I've measured how much quantity. That team that's doing the production tracking is for sure going to get to that, that milestone quicker, more effectively with a better grasp of their cost than the team that's just every month they're remeasuring quantity to go. They see their cost a day and then they just sort of take that rate and push it out.
Yeah, the number one benefit of the production rate is you definitely fight back against the like common pattern, which is activities getting like 80-90% through duration and then blowing out by like a week or 2 weeks or whatever.
Yeah.
by tracking the production rate, you start seeing the hill to climb. You know, it's like, okay, in order to finish on that date, now production rate has to go from 100 per day to 150. Oh, now it has to go to 200 per day. At some point, someone's going to go, I don't think our trend over the last 10 days was 50. I don't think we're going to do the 4 times.
The thing that's incredible is that I couldn't think of anything that would piss a project manager off more than that. I mean, I've seen it, and these engineers, like, they don't want to piss off the PM. They want them to be happy. A PM would rather get bad news like 10% of the way into the work. They would be
100%.
happy. They would be like,
Yeah.
that's awesome. I'm so glad. Like, we can do something about it. You know, we can spend some money, like, we can forecast it. There's nothing they hate more than, you know, that 80% of the way through, and then suddenly someone nervously comes up at the whiteboard.
Yeah, it's that. It's they just come out. They just come out of the like executive head office meeting where they've just said, "Yeah, our dates are very believable. We're definitely going to hit them." And then they walk into like the look ahead meeting, and the engineer goes, "That task that was on track 3 days ago, we're going to push it out by 2 weeks." And then the worst thing is because they know they're delivering terrible news, the incentive is to underestimate the blowout again.
Yeah, and then do it again.
So you'll do it again in 2 weeks' time. 100%.
I think the sooner engineers learn that, like, you know, understand your scope, PMs love it. Even bad news is better than that. That's the last thing they want.
There we go. Sam's LinkedIn post for the week. Bad news early. Something about bad news early is good news.
Because the bad news is inevitable, isn't it? Like, I don't think they tell you that, but like, you do a few projects, I don't think there's such thing as no bad news on a job. So there's my hot tip. Get in front of it.
There we go. Tips. Righto. All right, let's move on before we run out of time. So final topic on the docket is a little bit out of wheelhouse, but we'll have some discussion about it anyway. The story in the news as it happened recently is that a UK engineering firm or a UK engineer recently won an award for an international competition. It was essentially arranged by a group called the Norman Foster Foundation. And the competition is essentially a design competition focused around the master plan of Kharkiv, which some estimates say has been like 70% damaged or destroyed as part of the war with Russia. So the competition was this international competition of architects to submit designs to basically not only restore the city, but kind of reimagine the city as this like symbol of resilience and community. For some background, Norman Foster, so the body holding it was the Norman Foster Foundation. Norman Foster is a extremely famous English architect. He's designed some of my favorite buildings in the world. So it's called the Gherkin in London. It's 30 St Mary Axe, and also Apple Park in Cupertino. This firm, his firm, Foster and Partners, is one of the largest architectural firms in the world. So I guess the discussion around this award probably boils down to, if we were to kind of précis our discussion off air, was like, it seems like there's some good thought and ideas behind it and some value to doing it. On the flip side, it seems possibly a little bit in bad taste to be holding design competitions of architects from around the world telling Kharkiv about how they should rebuild the city while they're still fighting to have a country.
Yeah.
Over to you.
Yeah. I'll do this for you. I mean, like, you look at so the competition attracted 259 entries from 53 countries, which is incredible, and 27 from Ukraine. And so I guess I think it's like a lot of things where you've got architects. I'm not going to jab at architects, but if you spoke to the majority of people from Kharkiv, would they give a flying fuck about these things? Like, is this top of mind to them? I think it's nice. I think it's nice that, like, they're putting thoughts. I think that, you know, the mayor going out and reaching out the international community and people thinking about, you know, rebuilding the city, I think for a lot of people would be, you know, a nice sign of hope, or, you know, what will be in the future. But at the present, you know, that's not I think, like, there's other priorities. So with all these things, Yeah.
The flip side is like this is intentionally over inflammatory, but like the local drug dealer sponsoring kids football match is like, it is nice that they're sponsoring the football match, but is it with the expectation or to generate future business?
Yeah.
Because at some point there's a lot of work in actually rebuilding Ukraine. So I know that the foundation and Norman Foster, I think I read that it's like pro bono to run the competition. I don't know if those submissions were doing it pro bono. I think possibly it would make sense that they are, given the number of them.
Oh yeah, I would say so.
But is it just bidding on a job?
Like, I often think that as an architecture firm, there's an amount of work that you're doing just to get your sort of designs out there and highlighted. And so this sort of, I don't know if you call it, I guess it is a competition, but yeah, it's like there's an amount of money that I think architecture firms are assuming to sink into doing things that they're never going to win, just to be sort of invited to say that they were part of that. But it is a lot of entries. I think that, you know, in the end, like, it's the mayor of Kharkiv who's asked for this. Like, does he have the ability to then go and bankroll this job? Like, you know, is the government behind? Exactly. Like, it's not a real thing. Like, the likelihood that this is gonna, like, an ounce of this is gonna progress through to a final design is like less than 1%, I would say. But so I think it's, you know, there's other reasons to do it. But I doubt any of them are putting it in their forecast that they're going to win, you know, some sort of job out of this.
Yeah. The other, I guess, criticism of the whole approach, which obviously then was won by a UK. So it was hosted by, like, originally a UK. The body hosting it is based in Madrid, but it's the foundation of a UK architect, and it was won by a UK architect or engineering firm. So there is the criticism that, like, the architecture style is like being imposed on the city. They don't have local context or knowledge. I think I did read that Norman Foster had never even been to Kharkiv before. So it's just like inventing a competition for, like, not only just like for designing a building, it's like master planning the city.
It's like a design they would do for sort of like a new area of London, and they're trying to like healing Kharkiv from rubble to renewal. And you know, they base their design out of sourcing concrete and materials from destroyed structures. Like, are they going to pull the missile and bullet casings out? It feels like the type of thing that would win an award in a major capital anywhere in the world, but it just doesn't feel right for a country at war, and that's how you sort of feels a bit tasteless.
Yeah, I think there's also, if it ever got built, you end up with that risk of, like, you end up with this one little bit that's been rebuilt.
Oh yeah,
and then the rest like, probably just spread the money around instead of spending all the money on the big thing in the middle.
Yeah, I mean, comparatively to what we talked about, where they were going for putting a plan together for the country to hit, a carbon neutral target 2050. That feels way better than this. This feels very much like flexing, and everyone patting themselves on the back in the architecture space. But that's just my jaded view.
Yeah. We definitely hope the underlying idea is genuine, and that the actual output is useful and valuable. And it's not just a, let's host a competition for who can master plan the moon, just so that we can have a publicity announcement of here's what the moon's going to look like.
I guess the other way to look at it is it better that it happened than it didn't happen? If it makes a bunch of people happy, like, then, it's not like, I don't know if it's hurting anyone. I don't know how many people are going to be truly offended. So
there we
play
go.
on.
Play on. Yeah. Okay, good. Right. We wrap on there. So thank you very much, everyone, for listening. Thank you, Sam, for joining. If you liked this episode, please subscribe and tell your friends. We appreciate the feedback, and see you all in the next one. Bye-bye.